If you're anything like me, you grew up playing the best Battlefield to have ever existed, Battlefield 3. In that game, there was a weapon so broken, so overpowered, you were at a disadvantage if you weren't using it. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but it was instantly iconic and a lot of fun to use. That gun was the M16A3. But anyway, that's enough yapping. Let's go out and shoot this thing. Gentlemen, welcome back to the agency. Today we're going over my Battlefield 3 M16A3 clone again, and I will keep calling it an A3 clone. And we're going to talk about the real life A3. I touched on this in a previous video, but I got some stuff wrong, so we're going to talk about that today. But first, I want to break down this build because I know people are gonna ask, and you guys deserve answers, all right? So I'm not gonna get into so much detail like I did in the previous video. You can go check out my first Battlefield 3, I think it'll be up here, Battlefield 3 video. You can go check that out. We can talk about the intricacies of the muzzle device and all that. But as far as the part 2 goes, I want to talk about the new attachments that I have acquired. So up front, we have newest edition would be the Pentagon light. So the Pentagon light, I got this idea from a guy who cloned Blackburn's M4 from the Fault Line trailer. He identified the light as a Pentagon light, so I went on eBay, found one for like 50 bucks and ordered it, and it came with a pressure switch that has momentary and constant. So pretty cool little piece of technology. So these were kind of around during the 2000s, and that's what they modeled it after. Pentagon light got sued out of existence by Surefire because I guess they were copying their tail cap switches or something. From what I understand, a lot of guys really like the Pentagon lights, so if you're an older guy who remembers these lights when they were, still in production, I'm sure that was the second time in your life you got bad news about a Pentagon. Moving on, we've got the P&S foregrip, and all this is attached to the P&S M5 RAS with the rail cover on this side, just like the one in game. And then up top, we've got the coolest edition, which would be the Trijicon Reflex sight, or the RX01 1x24. They're not made anymore. From what I understand, they may not even be serviceable anymore because I don't think Trijicon is replacing the tritium in these. So once it goes, it's gone forever, unfortunately. This one is the triangle. I think it's a 65 MOE triangle. The fiber optic on the front is really good still, but the tritium on this one is a little bit depleted. So in the darkness, it's really kind of hard to see. If you're using a weapon light, it's even harder. And then if you're in an area of like darkness looking into brightness, it's not very great. Right now it looks pretty good, but in certain lighting conditions, it can kind of get blown out pretty easily. But that's pretty much the updated build. And of course we got the wrap stock, which some of you in the comments told me was for if you're walking around the desert a lot and your gun is getting hot, giving it that cheek weld makes so you don't burn your little cheeks. And then down beneath, we got the Hogue grip, nothing special here. And that's pretty much all I got. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk about the real life A3. The real life M16A3 has seen a lot less action than Battlefield and airsofters have given it credit for. So let's take a trip down memory lane. It's the 90s and the US military is deciding which way it will go. The M16 is great, but demand for optics and modularity are starting to appear in corners around the military. Things like the SOP mod program are starting to introduce optics and modularity for the individual operator to choose from. And in 1997, the M16A4 is adopted, although it didn't see much service until 2003. But what about the Navy? Navy and Air Force are often forgotten about because they're not high-speed operators. Those branches have different roles, and most small arm usage comes from guarding an airbase or a ship. After I did some reading online, what I was able to piece together is that early M16A3 rifles were actually just A1 lowers with A2 uppers on them. The Navy can be stingy and doesn't always see the benefit of completely swapping to a new rifle because their small arms don't see a lot of use. While the Army and the Marines are switching from the A2 to the A4 or the M4, the Navy seems to just continue thugging it out with the A1, A2 hybrids. It reminds me of how when the M14 was adopted, the Navy built 7.62 Garands because they didn't see a need to purchase the new rifle. They thought their M1s were still plenty serviceable. So I continued my research and I spoke to Small Arms Solutions and discovered that at some point the unofficial A1, A2 rifle got its own designation and was produced by FN. And this designation was the M16A3. So essentially the gun is a full auto M16A2 with a fixed carry handle. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the end of the video. No, just kidding. The story actually goes a little bit deeper than that. And those full auto A4s from Battlefield 3 might not be outside the realm of possibility. An Instagram account by the name of 20-inch Barrels has put together a collection of images from across all branches showcasing 20-inch barrels. Among these, he's included several photographs of the Navy using what appear to be A4 rifles. But wait a second, is that a full auto marking? And is that an M4 with an M16A3 lower? It is. But why? How can this be? Well, as it turns out, sometimes commands do whatever they want. Certain armorers or units can play around and bend the rules. Now, these fleet modifications can be considered unofficial and maybe even illegal. Of course, just because something is illegal doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I mean, I just had lunch with my Tío Juan last week. Let me tell you, he's very much so real. I'm joking, I don't have a Tío Juan. At least not according to US immigration. It's hard enough to try and find information about the normal A3s. When you go to try and find information about these A3, A4 hybrid guns, it's even harder. There are barely any official documents that mention this. The closest thing that I could find that was resembling official documentation of an A3, A4, an A3 with an A4 upper was an Army manual. We will put it on the screen now. It simultaneously lumps it in with both the A4 and the A2 when it's talking about the rear sight. So why does it matter? Ultimately, it doesn't. It's not going to make you a better shooter. It's not going to make you a better man. But I just think it's fun to learn about some of these niche sub-variants of ARs and then go online and pick fights with people about what they really mean. I just think it's interesting. There's tons of information about the main series of ARs, right? The A1, the A2, the A4. There's plenty of photos and videos discussing those in great detail. But the A3 is something that people often forget about, so I wanted to take this time to think about it. Remember the A3. I believe that if the 20-inch rifle remained the standard in the US military, we would have seen these A3, A4 hybrids get their own designation in the same way that the A1, A2 hybrids got their designation, turning into the A3. Of course, the Marines experimented with the M16A5 concept, but that unfortunately didn't really go anywhere. Marines were always able to put M4 stocks on their guns just for the shorter Marines, or the females, but they never had the VLTOR, I don't know if that's how you say it. They never had that system, it was just a normal M4 lower, or M4 stock and buffer tube. So how does it relate to Battlefield 3, the game that my rifle is cloned after? Well, the way I see it, the assault class is a medic, and the US faction is the Marines. Marines don't have their own medics, they use corpsmen from the Navy. So in my headcanon, the assault class is actually a corpsman who's actually in the Navy, and therefore that's why he has an A3. And he's taken his A3 lower, put an A4 upper on it, because he's both the Navy and he's a Greenside FMF corpsman. Forward deployed to the Marines. That's my headcanon theory.